Teachers of Reddit, what the worst thing that happened on a school trip? This happened just the other week. We had left the school about 5 minutes before on the bus, when a student got my attention and said, "Miss, someone hit a girl in the head with a bottle and she's crying. I think here we go," and head down the back to settle them down. I get there. Students all looking on and crowding on. And sure enough, the girl is in tears and is holding her hand against her head. I ask, "Are you okay?" And she pulled her hand away from her head and it was gushing blood. We turned the bus around and she ended up going to hospital. Long story short, head wounds bleed a lot. 12-year-olds make bad decisions. And everyone was okay in the end. Can't say I felt overly prepared for that though. We went skating. And one of the students fell. Smacked her chin off the ice. And somehow got a skate blade to the face. She needed a bunch of stitches. And was able to stick her tongue through the hole in her face. That's just her mouth. Asked my students to be respectful of other pedestrians while on the trip. Because some people want to enjoy the nature center by themselves. Mom is not here, you little CNT. Wow, time for my very first silver. As a student I was left behind at a Hutterite colony. I went to use the outhouse and the bus left. My boyfriend was a teacher and his students went on the annual DC trip. It was like 2 kids to each hotel room or something, and there was 2 14-year-old boys that shared a room. One of the boys jacked off into a pillow. And then hit the other kid in the face with a cum pillow. Former assistant teacher here. We were on a 6th grade field trip to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Cool place. So, at the time one of the attractions was a sort of centripetal force machine that you can sit in and get swung around. Poor explanation, but imagine the Gravitron only smaller and faster with seats and no walls. I googled it but can't find the ride. Guessing it was swapped out for something else. Well, one dumbass kid thought it'd be funny to show off and see what happens when you undo your seatbelt while riding. Naturally, he got flung out of the machine at roughly half the speed of sound and broke his fall with nothing but his face. Glasses busted. Massive concussion. Totally wrecked. There was a whole investigation and the teacher in charge of that kid's group had to actually defend himself from accusations that he could have somehow stopped that level of stupidity. Sadly I didn't witness it but did hear the impact from one room over. Pretty interesting day, Your Honor. I could have stopped him. But then you'd be trying me for breaking the laws of physics. I was a new teacher when the whole grade went on a field trip during the first week of school. In fact, I was so new that nobody, not even my colleagues, noticed that I wasn't on the bus. So it left without me. Fortunately, the destination was only about 15 minutes away. So it wasn't a big deal for me to jump in my car and follow the bus there. Kids were going to a conference for a leadership service-oriented club. They got brought home early because a chaperone found an orgy in one of the rooms that had been pre-planned in a group chat that almost all of the kids on the trip were in. That was a shitstorm. I went on a class trip as chaperone to a science center. I was in charge of a group of 8 boys. One of them goes missing. I ask the others where he went. And they don't know either. He's missing for about 10 minutes until a security guard from the center comes up to me with him. The guy asks, "Is he one of yours?" And tells this kid to open his backpack when I say yes. Probably $200 worth of stolen stuff in there. I am a teacher but my anecdote comes from when I was a kid back in the mid-90s. We were visiting some museum in London and were traveling on the train and the tube with teachers. On the way back, some students didn't get on the tube before the automatic doors shut and the teacher in charge just yelled as loud as he could, "See you back at school, lads." And we just went home and the teacher waited at the school later on, and sure enough, about 40 minutes after everyone else got back the remaining kids turned up. If that happened to me now as a teacher in 2019 I'd be fired. Probably out of a cannon into an abyss marked RIP career. I'm an English teacher in Korea and field trips are different here. Usually, there are no additional chaperones. The teacher is responsible for all 25-ish students in their homeroom class during the trip. That means a field trip is often 8 classes of 25 students, 200 kids, and a maximum of 10 chaperones if some office staff get taken along. One of my first trips was to a large traditional market. It's a popular place to go and there are usually thousands of people there at all times. Our buses arrived and we all piled off in the parking lot. The kids were told via megaphone, "Be back here in 1 hour. Go." And all 200 of them scattered into the crowds and tents while most of the teachers got back onto the buses to have coffee. Surprisingly, 99% of the kids were back on the buses when they were supposed to be. However, a good number had bought small hamsters, turtles, or goldfish. 2 weeks later I couldn't find a single kid whose spontaneous pet was still alive. A girl on a beta club trip thought it would be funny to put bomb on board in the window of the bus. The interstate was shut down. The bus was pulled over and SWAT team raided the bus. The bomb squad was called in to sweep the bus even though the girl admitted it was a hoax. She didn't go to jail somehow. She was also a popular cheerleader and didn't get any disciplinary action from the school. Group trip to take a tour of a college campus. We had a young man jump out of a bus window while it was going down the highway. His long-term girlfriend had broken up with him a few days before. And he later explained that he didn't see the point of going on the college visit anymore because he didn't want to go to the same college as her. Or even apply to the same ones. Denied up and down that it was a suicide attempt. His friends circled the wagons and supported his story. And the story rumors died quickly. He got some gnarly road rash, but avoided being hit by any cars. I always got the impression that it was, in fact, a suicide attempt. If he didn't want to go on the tour, why go at all? Why board the bus? He could have stayed at school. This was several years ago. He is fine. Band trip to Disney World. Lead bus driver knew a shortcut. This led to 5 large motor coaches lost in an orange grove somewhere near Orlando. No idea how much damage we did to those trees. The roads really weren't designed for huge buses. When I was in the AmeriCorps, I was a tutor at a school where a popular 7th grader drowned on the class's end of the year field trip to a lake at a state park the summer before I started. There were no lifeguards on duty. He was in chest deep water when he went under in the lake and never came up. His friends and the chaperones tried to find him, but by the time they did, it was too late. This was an underserved school in a really rough neighborhood. According to the teachers, things were getting better at the school, but this really f***ed with the kids. It was a very challenging year for them. It happened right before we would enter the bus. My students had been waiting for a few minutes and some guys were messing around. I warned them to act normal but left them out of my sight for 1 minute to grab something from my post box. In that time they pressed the fire alarm. The whole school, 1,650 students, had to be evacuated to the car park where the bus also waited. It was not my favorite morning. Obligatory not a teacher. But when my econ class went to Nick for a field trip, one of my classmates tried to buy weed off a guy in an alleyway. Turned out to be an undercover cop. We were the honors class. He was a cool kid. I was walking to school in freezing weather one day and he offered me a ride. Don't remember what happened to him after that. I know he didn't graduate with us that year. You would think an undercover cop would have bigger fish to fry than a high school kid trying to buy weed. Why would he blow his cover over a thing like that? Not a teacher. But I've got one from my college days. Semicolon. Our history class had gone to see a Civil War battlefield. One of the trails my professor wanted to go on was blocked off by a wire fence and marked as unsafe. The professor just looked at a hole in the fence, looked back at the class, and said if they didn't want people going in, they wouldn't have left a convenient human-sized hole there, and led us all through. We walked down through the trail, had a good discussion and a couple pictures. But when we got back, a park ranger was there chewing out the teaching assistant who stayed by the bus. He let us go with a warning. but stalked us in a Ranger vehicle the rest of the day. Not teacher. I remember back in high school my friend got caught jacking off in the furthest back seat on the bus. By his mother. You know how it goes. 2 or 3 go missing and suddenly you're irresponsible and criminally liable. I don't know why anyone would get into the profession. We came back with an extra kid. The problem, we had more kids. At an apple orchard with young preschoolers. One kid, who was always an issue in some way or another, shit his pants. Fully. And didn't say anything. I just happened to pass him and smelled it. There were no restrooms. Just a porta potty. Had to stand him on the edge and try and get as much as the flattened turd out of his pants because there was no way he was going to sit in shit-filled pants for the 30-minute drive back. I was gagging and the kid was doing everything but following my directions. At one point I thought he was going to fall into the hole. It was awful. When I was a kid, our bus broke down outside Baltimore and we were there for like 3 hours. Okay. So not a teacher. But one time on a trip to the movies in 8th grade, one of the chaperones was my English teacher, who was deathly allergic to citrus. I think we know where this is going. On the bus ride back to school, a kid takes an orange, peels it and throws it at her. Hard enough to the point where orange juice got all over her shirt. Not sure if it was revenge related or just being a dick. Anyway, she immediately starts having an allergic reaction and we have to pull over on the side of the highway and wait for an ambulance. We go back to school and the day is over. The school sends out an email basically saying please don't attempt to kill your teachers with allergic reactions and that she will be fine. Although, we had a substitute for 4 days and the kid got expelled. TLDR. Kid almost kills teacher with citrus allergy on the bus. My 15 years old stepsister was caught giving a guy a blowjob on the bus back from their ski trip. Catholic school. They both got asked to leave. She moved to a local public high school and was known as Blowjob Girl. Side note. 2 years later my bio dad and stepmom split up. I'm back living with my mum. In a different town. 4 hours away. And a new kid starts at the school and he was telling the story of Blowjob Girl in our home ec class. Not a teacher. Just a student. Went to an aquarium just before finishing primary school which had an ice wall. I had a child have a massive asthma attack after a visit to a farm and a cotton gin. I ended up giving her mouth to mouth on the side of the road and praying for an ambulance. She was fine after a couple breathing treatments and some steroids. Thank goodness. This was before cell phones were common and we had to use the call box on the side of the highway. 10/10 would not repeat. School camp out in the bush and one of the kids got a tick on his penis. Had to call an ambulance because the teaching staff obviously aren't allowed to interact with a student staff. Went to a new school camp which featured a night walk. We got sent out with no map onto a very poorly marked trail. A large gap opened up and one teacher wound up with 55 of the students panicking around her while the 3 other adults had about 15 students with them. Eventually we made it back to camp with the right number of kids. Not sure if they were all the same ones though. Not a teacher but a chaperone on a 6th grade trip. And on the bus a pair of them all. Developed students proceeded to have a rather extensive makeout session. So I went back there and plunked my dad butt between them. They were not happy. The conversation about teen pregnancy avoidance was even more painful for them. 9th grade student got caught with beer in his energy drink bottle. Student very nearly got hit by a car. A 3rd student vomited. All on the same trip. Not a teacher. But I got abandoned by my group and left at Fisherman's Wharf in San Fran for several hours when I was 11. So that was fun. My sis went to NY for a field trip and the hotel told them not to drink the water. They found out a woman had drowned herself in the water tank. But apparently it was okay for them to bathe in it. My sis said the kids were washing themselves and going, OMG. This is dead woman water. Not a teacher. But I had a friend on this school trip. One kid had to go to the bathroom while they were trying to get to medieval times. They had to stop 3 buses for one kid to relieve himself. The closest bathroom was in the gas station right next to a strip club. Everybody was in 8th grade. I cut my hand open on one of those tuna lunch kits in 1st grade. I'd imagine that was a bad one for my teacher. Blood was everywhere and I was afraid of opening cans until I was 15. Once took the Model UN club out on a trip. All girls for some reason. The other teacher took the girls in while I waited outside for the stragglers. When I come into the building I see the whole group walk in the door and catch up with them. Turns out that door was the entrance to the girls' bathroom. I'm a guy. Not exactly a teacher, but I worked for a treatment program for kids with ADHD. We took a trip to the botanical gardens with kids who earned the field trip. I remember a story of my former religious education teacher. Don't know if it's the worst, but definitely funny. She naively went on a trip to Amsterdam with the graduation class. They told her it was because of the Anne Frank Museum and she believed it, which is pretty cute. The hotel, especially stairs and elevator, was plastered with the end of joints. Well, one of my students thought it would be cute to sit in a baby swing. She got stuck. The NYPD had to be called. They cut her out of the baby swing in front of the whole grade, who naturally swarmed the area to watch. Obligatory not a teacher but story. I went to a water park in 3rd grade. And I remember after our class got changed into our bathing suits, we noticed a kid was missing. And so were all of the teachers. Then we looked out at the area where the slides were. And witnessed this kid sprinting, butt naked, dropping logs as he went with 3 teachers and a lifeguard trailing him. They caught him, shut down half of the park for an hour and called his mom to come get him. And to this day I can't figure out why he did it. I'm a student. But at our school trip 2 teachers had an affair. People found out 2 years later and they're still going strong, lol. Another teacher mysteriously birthed a child 9 months after another school trip with my sister's class. The father was another teacher that was on the trip as well. I live in a small town. Once my boss FK'd up and we got to the airport late and we missed our flight. So 40 kids and 7 adults and he refused to split our group up. We ended up having to stay an extra night. It was a nightmare since our bags made it and we didn't. Also had a student fall off the train platform and onto the tracks, breaking ribs and knocking herself out cold. She looked like a ragdoll going down and I felt helpless just trying to keep the other kids calm. She was okay eventually. Not a teacher but once went on a trip to the woods. One kid climbed up onto the trees. After 10 minutes of sitting in the tree he decided to go down. And one branch snapped and the kid fell. There was a small twig just sticking out of this kid's thigh. As a 1st grade student, the worst thing that happened to me was being sent home with Pinky just before my class and I were leaving for our field trip to the Bluebell factory. All I can remember was crying on my mom's lap all day because it was so unfair. Not a teacher but I was a student. We went out ice skating. A 190-pound guy I sorta knew. He was in one of my classes. Didn't like him but I was too nice to tell him off. Was having trouble staying up and I was the closest person to him so he grabbed me and used me for stability. Only problem was he was putting all his weight on me and ended up pushing me down. Then because I was what was keeping him up, he fell and in the process stepped on top of my fingers and sliced 4 of them open. I really despise that guy. I'm okay but I still have the scars and a story to tell.